how many spells do you think it takes to deal with 6th Stone-Faced? Because all it takes is just one incineration spell. No troops needed. Love it. Okay, you lot, so today I have a run with just spells, right? So I've tried rerolling for a better starting position. As you can see, I wanted to sort of get like a decent starting point, and what I mean by that is mostly see if the tile placement is decent as well as the starting resources. That would help me out. Luckily, I feel like the first one was good enough. The wood is pretty good, and the starting archers were a very big selling point for me, because with King Spellers I usually struggle with like early troops especially, so just having those 2 archers and having a few more peasants is gonna be a decent starting position in my opinion, right? I also got pretty lucky with spells, sheep spell to deal with more difficult enemies, and the Fisher or whatever it's called to deal with a lot of AoE waves. So yeah, the starting is pretty similar, but the goal with this run was to sort of try to get a win by not using a lot of troops, right? I wanted to mostly do like 95% of the damage I wanted to do with just spells, and I let the troops do the rest. And trust me, spoiler alert, there were a lot of funny moments when it comes to spells, and honestly just to showcase the absolute strength that spells are. So for reference, this is on threat level 4. I did manage to beat threat level 4 once before this run happened, and it was with a very similar build, so I sort of had a little bit of a better idea of how to approach this. So yeah. Now when it comes to waves, I usually try to place a lot of like similar units together with each other, because usually if you place a lot of different units, especially when you're dealing with spells, some of them, for example, move faster, some of them move slower, they sort of split up here and there, and if you place similar units, for example, if you just place the wall busters all together into a single wave, it will be much easier for me to, for example, use a single spell and just deal with all of them very easily, right? So that's usually, especially when I play with spells, that's what I usually do. When you play with troops, it's not as important, I would say, because with troops, they will attack, you will attack, and a lot of chaos will happen, but the troops, troops don't have a certain specific targeting point, especially single target troops, and even for troops, I would say especially if you are able to split up your enemies a bit more, it's actually a good thing, because you have to fight less enemies at a time, right? For example, if one of the enemies is super fast and another one is super slow, that way your troops are able to deal with one wave and then deal with the second part of that wave a little bit easier, right? But for spells, you do want to clump up as many of the same enemies as possible, because it just makes it easier for you to deal with all of that. So yeah, for this one, I'm currently looking at the current waves and seeing whether I should use a spell or not, because I was thinking if I use up the damage spell, will I have enough spells to deal with the later waves, stuff like that, right? So yeah, for this one I did decide to use the sheep spell, because I know that the next few waves were pretty much all wall busters, so those don't exactly really do damage to your troops, they just target your wall directly, so I wasn't really needing any spells, even if they crash into my wall, right? The damage they will do isn't that massive, so I'm completely open to letting them through, right? And yeah, I just wanted to deal with those early waves a bit better. Now with this wave, I knew that my troops wouldn't be able to kill all of those wall busters, right? But I also didn't really want to use the Fisher spell, so what I thought is, if I place the Scarecrow there, right, somewhere in the middle of the troops, the damage troops, the little grunt and the little archer that are actually doing damage would focus on it, right? And by then, I would be able to drop the spell, right? Like essentially, I wanted to clump up the enemies together. As you can see, the wall breakers, they are very, very slow, right? And it's very difficult to kill them together. So if I just use the Scarecrow as sort of like a taunting mechanism, you can bring the troops a little bit backwards, and that way you are able to deal with them. So I know Scarecrow is a bit of a disappointing pick if you do get it from a spell, but I actually like it, especially when you're dealing with other spells such as like Meteorite, Poison, all of that. Like all of those spells that focus on a single small area, right? Although I do want to mention that don't try to use that with the lizard enemies, because they will just start driving through the Scarecrow that you place, and then it will be pretty much impossible to actually hit them with spells. Now for the first shop upgrade, I was super lucky. As you can see, both of the upgrades that I get for buildings are actually upgrades to my magic, what's it called? Magic school, right? So that pretty much like, I knew that if I pick those two, I pretty much have a maxed out spell building, and that would boost my progress highly. I was looking for any other buildings that could help me out here, but unfortunately there was nothing, so I just decided to go for both of those upgrades and just fully pivot into spells early on. Plus, I also picked up some metal because, I mean, metal I don't exactly have much use for, but as you know, I'm a big fan of getting metal and flour from the worlds, because both of those you can sell for 3 gold in the market, so you can easily stack up on those. Plus, eventually, if you do pivot into Magic University, you do need some steel to build that building, right? But for now, it is a very good option to get a lot of gold early on. And yeah, now that I had a fully maxed out magic school, I decided to go for spell production, right? Week 66, I know that I do have crystal generation upgraded to level 2, so I'm getting 2 crystals every 3 seconds, which is somewhat enough to, I didn't do exact calculations, but it is somewhat enough to upkeep the spell production. Plus, if anything, I always have a crystal mine here and there laying around. So yeah, at this point, I sort of stopped focusing on troops and fully started focusing on the spell production. Now for waves, again, if you do get spell rewards from waves, and especially if you're going on a spell build, I usually try to clump all of the spell rewards into the first, maybe the second wave, and then I have a lot of small enemies that I could deal damage to with spells into the later waves. That way, even if I don't manage to get a good spell from like my actual King's ability or my actual spell, like Magic School, that way I'm able to at least have a good chance of getting a good AoE spell from the rewards, right? And that way being able to deal with it somewhat, right? Now, luckily, I did get Mines, which is, in my opinion, one of the best spells when it comes to dealing with large waves, right? Maybe behind Chain Lightning, because the distance between the 3 mines you get is pretty huge, and you can explode a lot of the enemies. As you can see, that was just 2 mines. I still have 1 leftover mine right at the start of the track, so it will be able to catch a lot of enemies there. And yeah, 3 spells are coming through. I'm trying to build up on the AoE spells. As you can see, I'm taking anything that does damage, right? And yeah, we will be able to deal with the upcoming 2 waves relatively easy. And also, I have to say that I love, when it comes to spells, I love dealing with waves like this, right? Like, you place 1 spell, full enemies, boom, done, instantly, right? Like, if you manage to kill them instantly, that's the most satisfying feeling ever. And I did get Archmage University as a purchasable item. I wanted to look around, maybe I have some decent artifacts there. There is the flower artifact, which gives you 250 upon pickup. I feel like, yes, it's a single time resource, right? But it's, especially if you get it early on, if you sell all of the flower, right, that is 750 gold that you can get. So honestly, it's way better than the fireworks that you could get. It's way better than all of the items that you could sell, right? Like, I highly recommend, if you do have the ability to get a lot of flour and a lot of metal this early on, like week 150 and below, that is a very, very massive boost to your progress, because a lot of vision upgrades acquire gold. There are some troops that acquire gold. For example, for Spellus, his third ability also acquires gold, so that is just such a massive boost to your progress, right? I wouldn't take resources late game, like if it was week 300 plus, I would most likely not take that, but early on, this is a very, very huge progress early on, right? Okay, and I do have to say, Chain Lightning, right? You will see more of it later on down the video, right? But look at this. It might be one of the most satisfying spells that you can ever have. Because essentially it goes through every enemy that is close together, right? And yeah, it might not be a lot now, it might not be doing big damage, but trust me, wait until you see what happens towards like wave 350 and above, when I build up more spell damage with more morale, when I build up more of these spells. Trust me, this is one of the best tools to easily wipe out a lot of enemies. Now, I did get a few decent artifacts this time around. Remember, I did pick up the University, which I do need oil for, so instead of producing it with a pump, I could just pick that up and instantly place it, right? In fact, I could place... No, I couldn't place two because it does go up, the costs go up. But, I mean, you can place a University, you can use the oil for... or fuel, I guess, for the second King's ability as well, right? In some more dangerous situations, for reference, that gives you a legendary spell. So yeah, legendary spells are like a whole different tier above. I do have to say that it does have a lot of like more miscellaneous effects. So I do prefer the regular spells when it comes to like doing raw AoE damage, right? But for legendary spells, they're more sort of like, I feel like better for bosses, because there's the incineration spell, which targets a small area, but it does absolutely massive damage. There's the healing and invincibility one. There is the tornado, which it does good damage, but it sort of also can divert a lot of the units away from you, right? So more of like a CC spell. So I prefer to save those legendary spells a bit later on when we're dealing with like bosses and stuff. Also, one thing, if you don't have an upgrade for your spell production buildings that allows you to stack them, not in your inventory, but as you can see above the king, yeah, there you can stack your spells in the pending rewards, as long as you have the upgrade, which essentially gives you choices of two different spells, right? Because once you reach the maximum number of spells in your inventory, all of your spell production buildings will essentially stop working, right? And if you don't want them to stop working, you just can just keep one spell space always empty, right? And simply stack all of your spells as a pending reward, right? And what I really don't like about legendary spells in that regard is that legendary spells, right, like only one building can produce legendary spells, and they usually take up a lot of your space. Plus you will usually not have the upgrade for your university early on, which allows you to stack your spells as a pending reward as well, and that way your inventory will fill up with spells and you will have to throw out some spells that you may not need, right? Like, it's not too bad once you have the advisor, which gives you like 3 extra spell spaces, but if you're only running 6 spaces, you really run out of space quickly, right? So yeah, you really have to sort of like juggle whether you want to actually start producing legendary spells, or you just have to really like wait for the upgrade to come up. But yeah, when it comes to the boss, this one usually pretty easy. Even if he wipes out your troops, you can usually just spawn enough troops to easily like catch up. And yeah, because I do have a few archers there, they are able to do big damage and deal with the boss relatively easily. And yeah, for waves, look at this, that very first wave, 25 grunts. These are the waves I love dealing with when it comes to spell-based builds, because one decent AoE spell and everything is gone. Now, unfortunately, I did get a very big nerf. Spell damage dealt is reduced by 50%, and that is not like a flat 50%, that is a scaling 50%, means that it's 50% of the total damage that I do, which is a very, very big nerf, might I say. But yeah, I would say like for a spell-based build, this run in terms of like boss modifier RNG was probably the most horrible one you could ever find, right? And trust me, it gets worse. For those who do know which modifiers exist, yeah, you can probably imagine which one I get next. But yeah, nonetheless, that didn't stop me from actually managing to pull through the victory here. And yeah, overall, let's see that big wave. So yeah, big waves like this, drop a little AoE spell, and hey, you can forget that the enemies ever existed. And even with the lower spell damage, because of the Speller's King, because you do have the morale boost, you still do pretty big damage and are able to essentially pull through a lot of the kills. And finally, I did manage to get the first quest done, which this is one of the most OP rewards from any quest that you can get. It gives you 80 of each resource. So first of all, you do get fuel, which usually builds up your stock if you do want to build the Archmage University, right? That's a very important thing. Plus, you do get furniture, which you can sell if you want for the green currency, right? But if you want to actually win the run, you can sell it for 110 denarii, which is a massive boost, whether you're buying like upgrades, whether you're buying rerolls. Is an absolute game changer, right? But yeah, for this one, again, I really don't like the little dinosaurs, right? Because they're super fast most of the time, and they usually they sort of like run away from the rest of the units if you don't deal with them super early on. So I did have to drop the meteorite spell, right? Otherwise, any other regular spell wouldn't be able to just reach all of the units. But yeah, I finally managed to upgrade my vision to the maximum, and I'm gonna try to pivot to more spell production soon. Now, I did manage to pull through the spell production increase on the Archmage University, so I felt like it's a pretty safe time to sort of like build upon that. Now, in the trader, this time, there wasn't really too much that really helps with spells. I do like the Toad from time to time, because especially for a spell-based build, like I don't have a lot of troops going, right? I don't usually produce troops, so any troop that I can get as a temporary one, or that I could just summon with like whatever currency, whatever spells and stuff like that, is a decent addition, right? Because again, like I don't want to focus on the peasant huts mid-battle, right? I really want to upkeep the production even as the boss fight goes on, because if I just start producing troops, I'm losing on a lot of potential DPS there. And yeah, so any temporary troops that I can take, whether it's archers, whether it's these toads, goose, or whatever I can get offered, right, I usually try to take. Now for these waves, look at this, Incineration spell. This is a massive damage spell. And yeah, I mean, almost. I think one of the upgrades that I picked, where you get like 12 damage every second, that actually managed to just fully kill the golems. And yeah, spells are finally starting to do a lot of damage. As soon as the boss wave is over, my spell damage will once again be proper, right, not nerfed in half, and we'll be able to do a lot of easy wipes moving forward. Okay, and after this wave, I did manage to pick a very important building for this run, and that is the arena. So usually the arena, oh wait, do I have data? Oh, I did have arena from before. But yeah, basically arena, when it comes to spellers, right, the king spellers, it's such a massive boost, right? Usually you want arena for your troops, right? But with spellers, the morale actually boosts the damage of your spells. And once you get the arena going, once you get the upgrade for the extra morale, you can stack up several 100% multiplier on spells. At the moment, as you can see, it was 133, but that's the reason. One of the reasons for that is because I do still have half of the spell damage nerfed from one of the conditions, right? And once you get the arena going, once that nerf expires, you will be able to do massive damage with just your spells. Now there's one drawback with spells, and that it really struggles to deal with a lot of like high damage, or not high damage, but high HP enemies, right? And for that, what I try to do is I try to keep up a stock of pending rewards where I could simply choose a lot of AoE spells one by one, right? And for dealing with bosses, I usually try to stack up a lot of like sustain spells, CC spells in my inventory, right? And that way, whenever the boss comes, because with AoE damage, right, usually any AoE damage will do, and any AoE damage will be able to deal with a lot of the mass hordes of enemies. But for bosses, you do need to have a lot of spells ready, right? I usually try to have like 5 sheep, maybe like 4 invincibility spells, just to make sure that I'm able to survive all of the waves, right? So for bosses, you usually want to try to stack them in your inventory. But yeah, now the boss comes. The problem with this boss, right, is this boss usually will wipe a lot of the troops that you have during a fight. And it's not a huge problem if you have a very like troop-based build where you can focus on a lot of troop production and you can produce your troops back during the fight early on, right? The problem with a spell build, right? With a spell build, you unfortunately can't do that, because you sort of usually have the troops from a reward, right? So yeah, I pretty much try to take any stock that I have. I do have to say one thing, that the little summon blade spell is actually really good on this boss, because it actually pretty much hits all of the blades on him, right? But yeah, when it comes to this boss, my strategy is usually, because I don't have a lot of production, as you can see, and even if I can produce, it's gonna produce really slowly. My goal is to protect as many troops as I can. You can protect them with 2 different spells in this case, and one of them is the legendary spell that you see in the second slot. That's essentially like a heal plus an invincibility spell, and you can also protect it with a undying spell, which is the second position on the last line, and you have to target them somewhat correctly just before the boss flies out, right? And the problem with that is, if you have melee units and range units, you usually won't be able to protect both of them because they will be far from each other, right? So you sort of have to like target them on a group that you have the most DPS with, I guess, right? For me, that was the archers, because usually my peasants aren't exactly built for damage, especially in such few amounts. So yeah, what I try to do is I try to protect my DPS, and then I try to quickly build up any troops that I can that would stay in the front line. But overall, yeah, I would say Dragon, when it comes to the spell build, Dragon is probably one of the more harder ones, because he will pretty much always wipe out your whole team, even if you don't have a lot of them, right? Sometimes you can push it with a tornado, right? For example, if you push him to the side, he will actually miss the units, right? Which I just wanted to be safe, right? But yeah, you can sort of like push him with the tornado. It's not always guaranteed, because you never know where the tornado will go. Sometimes the tornado might push him to the side and then bring him to the middle again. But yeah, overall, you can deal with him relatively okay if you have enough spells saved up, if you have a lot of sheep spells, if you have a lot of I guess blade spells are really good for him. Incineration spells are pretty decent. Other spells, they're more focused on AoE damage and they don't do a lot of like actual DPS. but some of these you can deal. Mines, I would say, are a pretty decent option as well if you can get all 3 of them to hit. So yeah, I did manage to beat the dragon in this case, and one boss remaining. Now I do have to say, we did manage to beat the boss, which means that we have a different condition now, and my spells once again are able to do big damage. That's why I'm stacking a lot of squishier enemies into the same waves. As you can see, wave 1 and wave 2, there's a lot of squishy enemies in there, right? And yeah, this, I feel like week 300 plus, yeah, we did get a horrible spell. Like whenever you use a spell, the slot containing it becomes sealed for a period of time. That's probably the worst modifier that you can get on a spell-based build, right? The good thing is that with an advisor that gives you 3 extra spell slots, this becomes a little bit easier to manage. If you don't have that advisor and you have a spell build and you get that modifier, I'll say it as it is, right? You pretty much lost, right? But in this case, it is possible to somewhat work around it, right? Because for the regular waves, you usually won't use more than 1 or 2 spells, and by the time all of your spells are locked, the first ones will start unlocking slowly. So yeah, it is pretty difficult to manage, but definitely still doable if you have 9 slots. But yeah, now this is the time where spells become very satisfying to use, right? So you have these large hordes of enemies, you can drop a single spell, and a very well-timed spell can pretty much just wipe out the whole thing, right? So that is extremely satisfying to use, I can't even lie, right? The rest of the whatever is left, usually your troops can deal with. In this case, I do know that my peasants are sort of like disposable, so even if a few of them die, you can easily just regen them. But yeah, I mean, I really like... One of the reasons why I do enjoy playing spells is that you can deal with a lot of these waves with massive amounts of squishy enemies with just a single spell, right? That's probably one of the most fun, one of the most satisfying parts about this king. And yeah, as you can see, we have another wave coming in. And yeah, I'm just browsing through whatever spells I can have, right? I don't exactly want to use like legendary spells if they are not needed. So most of the time I try to use a little bit easier spells. In this case, I do know that most of my regular spells are simply not going to be able to wipe out all of those enemies because they are somewhat tanky. But yeah, as you can see, 1 meteorite spell and everyone is gone. Now these waves are a bit more annoying for a spell-based build because a lot of the enemies are pretty tanky, right? So a tornado will be able to deal with somehow. Luckily, I managed to get 2 tornadoes for more as my artifact, right? I also do have the 12 fire mages that I got from the 3rd royal quest, so they will be able to do good damage, but they are very squishy, so I have to really like work to protect them. But yeah, a lot of the spell damage is now gonna jump up a lot. Plus, I believe I may have gotten an upgrade where each arcane unit actually gives me extra damage, right? So that also boosted the spell damage quite a bit. But yeah, overall, we're seeing the effects of a high spell damage percentage build now, and it's turning out to be very satisfying. And now look at this, 6 Sun-Faced are coming in. How many spells do you think it takes to deal with 6 Stone-Faced? Did you guess 2? 3? Well, you are incorrect, because all it takes is just 1 incineration. Well, no troops needed. Love it. Okay, and another big wave coming in. I thought about using Chain Lightning, but I know it will have trouble dealing with a lot of those tankier enemies, so I did opt out for a Meteorite. The rest of these, my units are gonna be able to deal with relatively easily. The Grunts will be sort of like a meat shield. I also have a few of those Toads which act as a meat shield, and the Fire Mages are able to deal with the rest. Okay, next up we do have a very nasty wave again, lots of tanky enemies, which is a bit annoying, so I did have to use a few spells to deal with this. So I used the Fissure, I used the Meteorites, Keep in mind that I can't sort of like use a lot of these spells at a time because they do get locked out, and I don't want to lock out all of the spells from a fight, right? Because that will really hinder my ability to from what I can choose when it comes to boss fights. But I do have 18 spells stacked up, so yeah, a lot of those are legendary spells as well, which I'm hoping will be able to help me in a boss fight. But as you can see, before it even reaches my troops, right, pretty much everything is dead, right? That's the power of, and look at this, every arcane unit on the battlefield, 3% boost to spell damage dealt. I do have healer mages, I do have 12 of those fire mages, as you can see, so there's 14 arcane units in general, which is another 42% to spell damage, which was already 350, now it's 477% damage. Once I switch off from the morale boosting, right, if I'm not active on the tavern and the arena, it's around 400, but once those are active, it's close to 500 spell damage, which is absolutely nasty when it comes to dealing with a lot of these waves. Okay, and now probably one of the most satisfying moments of this video, the chain lightning reaction. Look at this, 13 grunts coming in. What are we gonna do? We don't have a lot of AoE spells ready. I do have to save spells for the boss. Look at this, one by one everyone gets wiped, and one meteorite. Look at this, that's all it takes. 22 HP, 3 HP, and they'll just get killed by the artifact. How perfect is that, bro? 2 spells, and not even legendary spells. A chain lightning and a meteorite will be able to deal with sun-faced stacks, right? Like, that's amazing. And we have the final boss battle approaching. Overall, this boss, I did manage to get relatively lucky. It's not exactly a scary boss, right? The problem is my spell choices are gonna be relatively limited because keep in mind that whenever I use a spell, it instantly goes on cooldown, so I can't exactly spam a lot of different spells. I pretty much have like 7 to 8 spells for the whole fight, so I have to really use them sparingly. Speaking of which, this tornado wasn't exactly a good placement in my opinion, and I did have to drop a stun on top of that because it was still hitting a lot of my grunts. I only have 3 spells remaining, and I did see that he was getting a little bit too close to my troops, so I did have to drop the safety. I did drop more DPS because I didn't know how long my troops would be able to survive. This was a very scary moment, right? Because I knew that my troops are now super vulnerable, right? Essentially, I don't have any safety spells or anything like that. Luckily, he didn't do enough damage to kill all of them early on, but as you can see, the burn. The burn did do its part, and yeah, at this point I'm left out with no troops, just a few unicorns, which I did have saved up for the longest time. The cool thing about unicorns is they are super tanky, and if I'm doing damage with my spells, right, it sort of won't matter. But yeah, at this point I know that without troops it will be very difficult, so what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of reorganizing of the buildings that I have. I know that my spell production isn't exactly gonna be useful anymore because I already have 31 spells saved up and I won't be able to use all of them, so I sort of try to shift the focus more on quick troop production and then launch them one by one, because even if I launch them one by one, right, the boss is simply not gonna be able to reach my castle, and eventually I will be able to deal with him, right? I'm waiting for maybe some spells to go off cooldown, basically anything that would help me do damage to him. I also have some artifacts that are constantly doing damage, and yeah, I'm pretty much just spamming them one by one. They are dying a lot because he is still using attacks, he is still using spells, but yeah, as you can see, shifting all of my focus on troop production, right? Pretty much every building that I had that had troops, I'm sort of like launching into the battle, except for, of course, I do want to keep the morale because my troops will be able to do a bit more, or not my troops, but like my spells will be able to do a bit more with morale if I do have it active by the time I drop a spell. I didn't know if I'm gonna be able to drop a spell, but I just wanted to be safe. And yeah, overall, with enough spam, I did manage to keep him away from the castle. He did launch a few of those like fireballs at the castle, but those don't exactly do a lot of damage, and somehow I managed to squeak in, which, I mean, this would have been 10 times easier if I could use my spells, right? Because I have a million of them saved up. But yeah, in the end, we managed to pull through. Threat level 4. And yeah, spell damage. I mean, spell damage builds are super fun. And overall, I do highly recommend trying it out, because once you max out spells, right, crystal generation no longer an issue. You are able to really offload a lot of the danger from your troops. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. Spell build was really fun. Hopefully by tomorrow I will upload my run of a threat level 5, which I've managed to beat already. And yeah, peace.